Shalom everyone, and we are on Parashat Noach, second parasha of the year, the book of Genesis. You can find it in the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 9. אלה תולדות Noach. These are the generations of Noach. I spoke a lot about it in previous years. I just want to continue the same line that I started last week. Last week, Parashat Bereshit, I was focusing on a very important idea, the idea of the middle point. What is the middle point? So I elaborated on the special Zohar, saying that when we read in Bereshit, in Genesis, in the beginning, on the first verse, in the fifth verse, where it said there was a night, there was a day, one day, and we understand that everything was already finished, completed, then on that verse. So when the God, the Almighty Creator, created the universe for one purpose, remember that. It's very important to understand Parashat Noach. God created the whole world, the whole universe, all the galaxies, everything that we can think about and things that we don't even capable of thinking about. The whole universe was created for one purpose because it is the nature of the good to do good. However, in order to do good, you need to have someone that needs that good. Otherwise, you cannot do good. And therefore, we see the dichotomy between the darkness and the light, between the creator and the creation. And this dichotomy is the foundation of the whole creation. And then, since the creator is infinite, his creation was above time, and therefore, immediately above time, everything was created. So we are not within the framework of time. And therefore, when it says there was a night, there was a day, one day, the whole universe, the infinite universe, all the giving of the creator and all the receiving ability of the creation, everything was already created and won and completed, because for the infinite creator, there's no waiting. He's above time. So if the need was to give good to creation, that already happened instantly, and that's already the beginning of the creation. When it says that it was all one, so the Zohar says the only way you can say that it's infinite and one is by saying that the whole universe was one dot. Geometrical dot has no width, no height, no length, and no time. Okay? It's very hard, almost impossible for the human brain to understand that concept, but everything was already there. And as Rabbi Ashlag explains, the founder of the Kabbalah movement and the author of the most important commentaries over the Zohar and Rabbi Azakluria's writings, he said you have to understand when it says it was one and it was one dot, it means that all creatures, with all what can happen to them, till the completion of their journey was already included with all the different free will paths. That's very hard to understand. Were already included in that oneness that the Torah is telling us in verse 5 of chapter 1 of Genesis. Okay? So, why is that important? Because if everything is already included, and then we explained based on the Zohar and the teachings of Rabbi Zakloria and the rest of the Kabbalists, because the creation, the souls, where we were created with a desire to receive God's light and pleasure and good. However, He created us in His image. And the mental image of the Creator, we counted three aspects. A, the image of the Creator is the need to be independent, because otherwise you're not the Creator. And therefore, humans hate to be told what to do. They hate to be dependent. Sometimes they like it, but they never be happy. So you can never find addicted, happy people. You can never find people who subjugated, enslaved, and happy. It's like you need the independence as part of your identity as a human being, so you can never force somebody to be happy or to be successful. That needs to be created by the person himself. Now, there's also the aspect of giving. And you cannot give anyone when it's a perfect state, like in the first day. Okay? Perfect oneness. Therefore, the creation had to be broken and the process of evolution had to start. And I mentioned the Nachmanides explaining, and nobody doubts the Nachmanides. He's like, and that's basically the basic idea that's of Judaism, that there's only one ex nihilo, one creation of something out of nothing. And when uh, that's already in the beginning. So the primordial power that is the origin of all matter, of all the galaxies and all the universe, that came out, that was only one creation. And what does it mean? The Nachmanides is explaining this is 800 years ago, and that's based on thousands of years before, but he said it really clearly. When we speak about the Creator creating all kinds of stuff on the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth day, he did not create, he used the Hebrew verb yatzar ve'asa. Yatzar means to form, giving it a new form. Asa, manifesting it, which means creation happened only once. Everything was created in the beginning. Okay? Everything was already created, which means I explain it, there is a purpose. The purpose was given already in that point before the Big Bang, before physicality has erupted. Now, everything that happens in or during the process of evolution is predetermined, which means the whole process of evolution, and that's also right by some, I just read, I read many years ago, a research or like a thesis of some quantum physicists is saying if everything is dependent on consciousness and acknowledgement, therefore, the whole process of evolution had to be conditioned that in the end, there will be a mind realizing there's a process. Whoever understands the uncertainty principle. So, what does that mean? We're going back to the idea that there is a purpose for everything we go through, and that purpose is good, which means, therefore, that all the process of evolution, all the process of humanity evolving step by step, stage by stage, from one structure to another, from one society to another, from one community to another, from one political structure to another, it's all evolving, evolving up the scale. And we can see that in the end of Parashat Bereshit, with all the atrocities and terrible stuff that happens over there, the sin of Adam and Eve, the killing of Cain, killing his brother Abel, and more stuff that happened later on. At the end of the book of the Parashah of Bereshit, Noach is born with a note of hope. Reading the last verses of the Parashat Bereshit, on one hand, it says in chapter 6, verse 6, "Vayinachem Adonai ki asa et Adam ba'aretz." So God regretted that he made Adam. And it was said, okay? However, in verse 6, it says, "V'Noach matza chen b'nei Adonai." And Noach found grace in the eyes of God, which means here we have hope that things are still not lost, which means the whole parasha shows about terrible destruction and like somehow God is not successful in his creation. However, at the end comes Noach. Parashat Noach starts the next verse. Okay? And that's verse 9, Ele todot Noach. These are the offsprings of Noach. And then it says Noach was a righteous person. Noach ish tzadik tamim haya bedorotav. Et haElohim italech Noach. Noach walked with God. And Noach had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Yefet. And then the next thing is verse 11, Vatishachet haaretz lifnei Elohim. And the land, the earth, got corrupted before God. Vatimale haaretz chamas. And the earth got full of, and that's the word of the Bible, chamas. Okay? Remember, this text is thousands of years old. Okay? Now, what's amazing is the most important and most valuable translation into Aramaic is Onkelos, and he translates Hamas into Chatufim. Chatufim, kidnapped, the ones who are kidnapped. Okay, and what does it mean? When you take something or someone against their will, and that's the most horrible atrocity, when you simply go against the most important rule that somebody's happiness cannot be, you can't just trespass somebody's right for happiness by taking his freedom away, by taking his belongings away. And by the way, what the Zohar explains, and that's a biblical basic idea, even when you rob somebody from his money and belongings, this is part of his soul. Those sparks, they are divine sparks of God inside the money and the belongings. So when you rob a person, it's like you're robbing his or her soul away. Okay? So the earth has been corrupted. So as a result, we have the flood. Okay? And the flood, here we're talking about Noah being told by God to make the famous ark. Now, we have a little problem with it, logically. And we have to remember the same way the Nachmanides, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, he was born in Catalonia in today's Spain, 13th century, because he won in the debate with the Catholic Church. They wanted to kill him, so he ran away for his life. The king helped him to get away, and he finally arrived to Israel, becoming a very, very important, taking very important role in rebuilding the Jewish community of Jerusalem after the Crusades, because the Crusaders destroyed the Jewish population in Israel, and now the Nachmanides and some other great teachers were taking part of reestablishing the Jewish community in Jerusalem and the rest of the country. So, but Nachmanides was, as we said, a great sage, especially a Kabbalistic sage, and he is explaining that when we look at the stories, you can't take them just literally, because all of these stories, they tell us about the direction of thought. They give us hints. So whatever we see as stories, we have to look at them as legends. You can't understand them literally because, as he said, if the world was created basically in the middle point completely, whatever we see is basically the story is giving us hints about the real process that happened, the process of evolution, and how from pure light of the infinite creator, a, a universe, the universe came out with all its complexity and variability, and especially how did evil came into being, because evil had to come into being. Otherwise, we, the creator, the creatures, we, the souls, how can we achieve ownership, independence by overcoming negativity and creating our own happiness and success against the odds, against the challenges? And only by that we can create light out of darkness. And that is the purpose of the creation. The fact, as I said last week, is to understand that there is a purpose, that the creation itself, that everything around has a purpose. Everything that happens is connected to that purpose. Why? Because it's all coming. And we have to realize whatever exists, did exist, and will exist, already existed in the middle point, in the beginning. More than that, whatever happens is also part of the existence. Everything that happens so connects to that purpose. What is the purpose? To give human souls the option to feel uh, divinity, to feel being a creator in your own private world, in your own world, that we create the light out of darkness, that we create the sweet out of bitterness, as the words of the Zohar say, that we did it, though we have ownership for it, because that's the only way we can really reunite with the creator of the universe. But now it is from our point. We created it from bottom up. So, so when we read the portion of Noah, and we read how Noah made an ark, and if we even read the ark, the size of the ark, it's totally, if you really read and I said it many, many times, even if you read to the details, it doesn't make sense. How could Noah, his wife, and three sons and three daughters-in-law survive a whole year with all the animals, okay, in an ark that has no windows, okay? I'm not talking about the smell, I'm talking about oxygen, basically oxygen. How did they survive for a whole year? One window only, the wind was locked down for the whole year. Just read the story. When you read the Zohar says, no, the measurements of the ark, they are basically measurements of the supreme world. So what is the ark about? And here comes the idea that we have to understand, especially nowadays. Because if we're talking about corruption, oh, look around. The corruption described in Parashat Noach and in the Midrashim, the legend about Parashat Noach, the world we live in right now, 2025, the last month of 2025, oh, we have it all. The corruption, the corruption in every aspect of human life, sexual corruption, the erasure of the boundaries between female and male, humans and animals, and especially the idea that the more corruption is about the lies. You hear all day long, just you go online to any kind of media, and it's all full of lies. So much fake stuff, so much lies, so much hatred, so much corruption. And if you go back to the word corruption in the Torah, we read it on yeah, that was verse 11 in chapter 6. When the word corruption is being mentioned, vatishachet, corruption, Onkelos translation into Aramaic, ve'itchabalat. Whoever understands Hebrew, this is the same exact shoresh of mechablim. In modern Hebrew, mechablim is the name for terrorists, people who basically sabotage the structure and everything of human existence. Which means, what's the purpose of terrorism? To sabotage the structure of society, to sabotage the trust between the people and their government, to sabotage the trust between people and their legal system or a police system or any kind of systems around. But the idea is anarchism, to break down the structure so somebody can take over of the corpse of society after it falls apart. So this is amazing to realize. And I think people should understand we are in World War III. And the most powerful thing in World War III, it's not just the physical weapons. This is secondary. The main idea is terrorism. Terrorism is the idea of to terrorize, to make people fear. You know, when the PLO started to kidnap airplanes in the 70s, the result was the whole way airports are being structured has been changed. When September 11 happened, that became even more. It's not about killing people. It's about creating terror. And the idea is mechablim, to sabotage the functionality of society so societies will finally crumble under the suspicion, dysfunctional behavior of its different systems, and then others could take over those states. Meanwhile, we look around, we see that the world is full of so many dysfunctional states, especially those countries that funded and were the base for world terrorism. Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Afghanistan, and more countries on the way into basically falling apart. As we know, whatever you want to make others experience, that's what comes into you. So, but still, the world is undergoing a very troublesome process of those forces trying to sabotage the structure of society. Why is that? How is that connected to Parashat Noach? Because Parashat Noach is talking about how do we create an ark? How do we create a safety zone to guarantee that we and our family and whatever we created will stay safe when everything around is not safe anymore. When things that were uh, looked like they were safe, it will look like it's just getting better and better, and then it's crumbling in front of our eyes. And the answer is the structure of society is going through a cycle. Today, futurists, which means it's a branch of science that says we can, by learning the process of human society, we can foresee different stages of development of society in the future. Okay, this is not mystical, this is based on logic. So they realize that humanity is going through cycles, and Rabbi Ashlag already explained that some 90 years ago, that these cycles are basically part of the evolutionary process of humanity. Just to remember, when we try to idealize, like the Roman Empire, or let's say Athens, if you really go back to those civilizations, it's appalling the way they were thinking, which means in ancient Greece and Rome, a baby that was born and he was not pretty healthy, the parents will kill the baby. We can't even think about it today. Thinking that those societies, ancient Greece and ancient Rome, were built on robbing other cultures, other civilizations, other nations, and enslaving people. Like most of the ancient economy of ancient Roman Greece was built upon slave work, which is unacceptable today. Their way to entertain was based on reality shows, going to a stadium in which you watched the whole family on a picnic would watch people killing each other, or people killing animals, or animals killing and devouring people. Like, this is unaccepted today. We are living in a society that advanced so much from these ancient societies that we cannot accept their values. So, yes, when we are talking about the time of Noah, humanity has advanced a lot since then. Why? And that's what we have to understand. It looks like from, if you look at the childish aspect of looking at things, that whoever is more powerful, like in nature, will finally eat, devour the weak ones, and take over their territory. Okay? But in the long run, we realize that societies who are more, or societies who are more uh, aligned with the values of the Torah, and the values of the Torah are do not kill, do not steal, do not be an animal. And in Parashat Noach, we read the seven Noahide laws. And the law, it's a base of the Noahide laws. And the Noahide laws, you can find them after the flood in Genesis chapter 9, verse 4. אך בשר בנפשו דמו לא תאכלו. Do not eat meat when the nefesh, when the living soul is still there, which means A, never eat an animal while it's still alive. Part of it is also do not eat blood just from the animal. Why? Because you don't want to be cruel. Humanity was created to go upwards, to climb, to ascend, to soar to divinity, not to be animalistic. So we see that any culture that was the more vicious, cruel, there was their ideology. The Mongols, one hand, the Nazis, on the other hand. The moment you just, or ISIS, when cruelty is the pillar of your culture in order to terrorize, in order to take power, in order to get your enemies freeze out of fear, so you can take over them and do whatever you want with them and take away their freedom and their whatever they've got, including their lives. You're not going that direction. And what's happening? We see that along history, those those societies, those civilizations, they maybe were successful for a short time. Where are they now? It's like Jim Collins' book about Built to Last. Whoever read the book, amazing book, recommend it very much. That he's explaining like which American companies are the most successful. Are those the companies that say we will do everything possible in our hands within the law to make money, to take over, to grow, to become bigger and stronger? Or those companies who said, we will do everything in our power to serve our clients. Our vision is not to be big and collect a lot of money. Our vision is to make a difference and to help people. For the long run, those companies lived longer. Those companies survived more calamities, more crises, and made much, much more money. If I remember right, along the period of the research, we're talking from 1926 to 1990, the companies with vision, not money, vision, not power, not cruelty, vision of making other people's life good as the main goal, they made 15 times more money than companies of the same size, same market share, that they said, we're here to make money by any mean, as much as we can. So for the long run, we realize that the values that the Torah is teaching us in Parashat Noach basically are running to the core of humanity and all the forces that run through humanity, which means as humanity is more and more discovering its calling, its identity, we're searching, we're trying. Uh, Either you go, as Rabbi Ashlag is saying, either you go in the road of pain, and that means trial and error, and finally you find what's right through trial and error, which means the error is painful, so you try what's not so painful. So finally, you create societies that are more just and more into giving people freedom and the freedom to create, to generate, the freedom of speech, the freedom of commerce, the freedom of ownership, all of that stuff, and respecting what belongs to people. And that's, the also part of the Noahide laws. Shofech dam adam ba'adam damo yishofech. Do not kill, do not spill other humans' blood. Okay? And also part of it in seven Noahide laws, you need to have a system of policemen and judicial system to enforce those ideas of justice. Okay, otherwise you are going against God's laws. And that means that societies that do not respect the privacy, the happiness, the ownership of individuals, on the long run, they make less money. They have less money to buy weapons. They have less incentive to protect their countries while being attacked. Or usually, when these vicious countries, they do not respect people's rights, they attack other countries, and then they're being attacked back. They do not fight so vigorously to uh, for their country as those people who feel that their country is not they're not uh, uh, slaves of their countries. They're being served by their government. So we are in a process that has to um, redirect humanity, redirect the contract between the government and the people, redirect the relationship between human beings and the powers that run their society, the big companies, the politicians, and every ones who are holding to power. That has to be recreated because we can see all over the world, even what we call the free world, there's no trust anymore. And based on two things. One, people don't trust because they see what they didn't see before, because now things are in the open more than before. And because, again, we have the sabotage, we have terrorism that is meant purposely to create distrust between the governments and their people. Therefore, governments have to work much harder to gain the trust of their people. And that has to be recreated, reinvented. It will take time. It's going to be very painful, but that's the way it is. How do we protect ourselves? On the individual level, we have the story of Noah. And Noah is it's about the idea of honesty, integrity, loyalty to these ideas that are godly, which means they're not man-made, as we said last in Parashat Bereshit. No, things are not happening by random. No, no. There is a goal, there is a direction, there is an outline that directs the path of humanity, and it's going to end good. And how do you know? It's getting better and better. Yes, we are not a perfect society. However, no one would like to live 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, because relatively to where we live right now, it was hell. Okay, so it's all about being a righteous person. And now we have to understand righteous people are not supposed to be perfect people. As it says in Proverbs, Sheva yipol tzadik v'kam. A righteous person will fall 7 times and rise up again, which means a righteous person is not supposed to be a perfect person, which means if you think that you are perfect and you never make mistakes, so there's a problem because it says very clearly, "En tzaddik she'aseh tov v'lo yecheta." There's no righteous person who won't sin, which means if you're alive in a physical body, you sin. You make mistakes. And why do you make mistakes? Because without falling, you cannot get up. Without making a mistake, you do not learn. So Noah is not a perfect human being. What makes him a tzaddik, what makes him a And a tzaddik, in the Kabbalistic point of view, is a connection between the heaven and the earth. Tzaddik yesod olam. Tzaddik means a human being that lives the spiritual meaning, that is on the gateway to the spiritual universe. What does it mean? That if you are an animal or a human being who behaves like a beast, You care just for one thing. Okay? I want to be stronger so I can take as much as possible from what's around me. And what about values? Who cares about values? There's only one value, the survival of the fittest. That's Darwinistic. Okay? That's not the way the world is working. The world is not working randomly on the survival of the fittest. And we can see that nations, people who were stronger, did not necessarily survive. You want an example? One of the most upsetting example, disturbing example of all, is the Jewish people. Especially through the last 2,000 years, less than 2,000 years, without weapons, without ammunition, without always being the weak part of society, still Jews survived, not just kept their identity, not just kept their language and their main books. More than that, in the middle of being persecuted, robbed, kidnapped again and again and again, if you just learn Jewish history, between short times of uh, comfort and freedom and long times of uh, discrimination and persecution and whatever, stepping on any possible rights, human rights possible, still being weak. During the last 2,000 years, the Jews expanded their literature, their culture, by all means, into a huge amount of like treasures. How could you do that, survive, and not more than that, still make a difference? You come to the 20th century and you have that measurement called Nobel Prizes, and you see how Jews are leading among all nations of the world in the number of Nobel Prizes per capita. You're talking about generating any kind from literature, science, and anything possible, and always being there, although you're weak, you're not the strongest, you're weakest physically, but you're still on the lead in music against all odds, beyond all imagination, and then finally establishing a state in the middle of the zoo that is called the Middle East and being persecuted and fought against by so many people. Okay, not just the Arab nations, okay, the Muslim nations too. Okay, not just this, also the Soviet Union and even today, other countries and empires trying to sabotage the Jewish state, the only Jewish state. And if you look at the Israeli economy in the last 2 years, the middle of this terrible war, okay, and Israeli economy is rising in a speed never in its history. And you ask yourself, how could this be possible? And the answer is the rules that guide this world are not the rules that we think we understand. The rules that guide this world are explained in Parashat Noach. It is about the covenant, having that commitment. If you read the Zohar of Parashat Noach, it's about a commitment. It's about Brit. Now, the word Brit is coming here with Noach. Noach discovers the Brit, covenant. He makes a covenant with God. And that covenant is a covenant between God and all of humanity. And what does it mean that this covenant overrides any kind of ideas that humans invent in order to create a society? And as long as their society is not aligned with the covenant of God and Noah, this society is not going to survive. It will fall apart. So that's why we read in the Zohar Parashat Noach, verse 3, ולא עוד אלא שישראל נקראים משום זה צדיקים. The nation of Israel are called tzaddikim, righteous. Are all the Jews righteous? Of course not. How can you call them righteous? Righteous in the English term, but in the Hebrew term, a righteous person is not a perfect person. A righteous person is a person that is committed to a certain universal laws that the Bible represent, which means the fact I'm committed to it does not mean as a human being I'm 100% following it. But when I fall, I get up again. When I go astray, I find a way back. That means following the covenant. I'm a human being. I'm not expecting myself to be perfect. Not today, not yesterday, not tomorrow. But I'm looking for perfection. I'm not here to be perfect. I'm here to perfect. So that's called observing the covenant, which means I have a covenant with the Creator, with the creation, that I will follow rules of honesty. I will follow some rules of integrity. I will not steal. I will not kill. I will not try to grow on the expense of others. I will do it on my own. I'll create on my own. And what happens is a long history. Those people are the ones who made humanity great. And the people that said, but I can take whatever I see. Who cares about the laws? You know, integrity and honesty is for the weak ones. So yes, they can rise as meteorites and they also burn themselves as meteorites. Again, like the Mongols, the Crusaders, and so on and so forth. And the Nazis, which is new, and the Soviets. And we still see people trying through cruelty to take over and to control. It's going against the covenant. And the covenant applies to every human being, Jews and non-Jews. What's the difference? The more you committed to the covenant, finally, you will be more successful. You'll be more protected. So how do we know that? From Joseph. Bishvil sheshamar brit olam. Joseph was not a Jew. It was before Mount Sinai. He did not sleep with his master's wife. Why? Honesty, integrity, commitment to the covenant. Very simple. He learned the rules from his father. Although he could sell his dignity, his honesty, by sleeping with his master's wife. And you know what? He really wanted her physically. She was very attractive, the Midrash is saying that, and he had all the excuses. She was his mistress, which means she was his owner. That was Egypt. She could do with him whatever she wanted. He was her slave. Still, he committed to the covenant. He was not ready to get a gain, any gain of pleasure and power by trespassing and simply going against the covenant his father taught him. And therefore, he became Yosef HaTzadik. He overcame his urges, and they were very strong. He was a young, very, very young, healthy man. Okay? So that's how Joseph became a tzaddik. Okay? The righteous person, the chariot for Sefirat Yesod. There was no Torah yet. He still observed the covenant. The covenant is laid in front of us in Parashat Noach. Sexual integrity, um, legal integrity when we're talking about business, relationships with neighbors, with other human beings. all what the covenant is about. It's a covenant between humans and God. And what does it mean? These are eternal laws that you have to observe. When you observe these laws, your brain doesn't see that, but you are aligned with the flow of the universe. That means you will be more protected. Okay. And then, of course, the ark, the ark of the covenant, which means when a person is committed to the covenant, it generates around him an ark, not a physical ark, it's unseen ark. But Noah, because he was loyal to the covenant, therefore his descendants were saved, and we are all his descendants. Okay, so we have to understand what the eyes can show you has nothing to do with the way evolution goes. The evolution goes and rhymes with the song of the creation, with the middle point, with the idea that the world was created for the purpose of humanity to enjoy the light of the creation. And and in order to be aligned with that, you have to keep the covenant. So the ark is not just a physical ark. As the Zohar says, in our generation, the Zohar will be the ark of the covenant, which means when you study the Zohar, you realize it's not a tradition. It's not some ancient civilization that created some bizarre rules. And some of them apply to today. Some of them, they're not applying to today anymore because in ancient times, you could do this and this and this, and today you don't need this law anymore. No, it doesn't work. These laws are universal, eternal. If you follow them, you basically align yourself with the grid of the tree of life, with the grid of the flow of whatever is good. By the long run, you will see that you will be protected, your family will be protected, your offsprings will be protected, and therefore your righteousness, your loyalty, maybe it's going to cost you because you're going to have to, Joseph, his integrity, his loyalty to his master, his loyalty to the laws of his father. What happened to him? He was the CEO of his master. Okay? He ran the business. He was probably dressed right. He had access to good food. He was associating with the elite of Egypt. If you read the story carefully, when they want to obey his master's wife and to sleep with her, he was thrown into jail. It's not jail of today, it's a pit, right? He suffered for 12 years being in jail. Did he say, if I just listened to her, I could continue sleep with her behind my master's back, okay? And still run the master's business, enjoy both worlds, enjoy the physical, enjoy the prestige, the power, and so on. But Joseph knew from his father these laws, you cannot transgress these laws because they'll get at you. These are eternal laws. It's not some old man's wishful thing about how the world should look like. And that's basically what Parashat Noach is about. These are eternal laws. And if you want to go against these laws, go ahead. It's not going to work. Many cultures, civilizations try to go against these laws. They're gone. They're finished. And what do they say? When God is blessing Jacob, that his offspring will be like the soil, the word is soil of the ground, okay? And he asked, like, is that a blessing? And one commentary is saying, yeah, everybody steps on soil. Everybody steps on the ground. Finally, everybody find themselves underneath. The Jewish people, everybody stepped on the Jewish people. Everybody harassed the Jewish people. Everybody exploited the Jewish people. And now the Jewish people is still standing, walking, marching forward while previous civilizations are buried down beneath. And that's the power. When you follow that covenant, you will continue, you will linger. And that's what is being taught over here. So hold on to that. And nowadays, holding on to the secrets of the Zohar will help us because we need to understand how these laws are functioning. Newton, he got it through reading, a partial translation of the Zohar into Latin. But he said, all of these laws of the universe, physical and spiritual, the laws that guide history, all of them are hidden in the Torah. These are not laws made up by humans, you know, like the same people who profess and try to give us again and again Darwin's idea of evolution that it's random. They're the same kind of a group that try to prove that the Torah is random, that was written by people and does not have any divine source. What for? So they can invent their own way of life and transgress these laws, transgress the covenant that every human being is committed to. You can't run away from that. So when we understand, again, that that's the only way we can understand the Great War, World War III, we're at right now. It's a war between two different schools of thought. One says, we humans, we can invent whatever we want, any kinds of laws and ideas to serve whatever we feel like, and that will go well. And you see, cultures, civilizations are starting to crumble. Countries who were very successful in the past starting to crumble and fall apart. It doesn't work. Whoever can still hold on to the covenant, and the covenant is between humanity and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Here, it's the God of Noach. At the end of the parasha, Abraham is coming to the world. Again, with all atrocities, Abram is born in the end of the parasha, a new cycle of humanity moving upwards. Just before we end, the end of the parasha is about the Tower of Babel. And over there's an amazing study that we cannot skip. And that study is saying that Rabbi Yechiah, I'm reading verse 384 in the Zohar of Sulam. Rabbi Yechiah is quoting from the Torah about the Tower of Babel. And it's in Genesis chapter 11, verse 1. ויהי כל הארץ שפה אחת ודברים אחדים. And the whole country, the whole world, was one language. And everybody was in mutual, one nation. And Rabbi Yechiah is saying, Zohar 384, and God said that there are one nation and one language to all of them. And what does it mean? To make story short, They wanted to rebel against God. They were afraid that they're going to be punished again by God. So they wanted to guarantee that they won't be punished again. So what happened? They rebelled against God, against the covenant. But then what does it say? The Zohar continues. After the humans, the children of Noah, rebelled, and God said, verse 6, chapter 11, verse 6, Vayomer Adonai, and God said, En am echad v'safa achat lekulam. They're one nation, one language. V'zeh achilam lasot. And then what they just started to do to rebel against God. V'ata lo yibatzer mehem kol asher yazmu lasot. And nothing can stop them, whatever they want to do. Okay? And the Zohar continues, what do we learn from that? This is 387 in the Zohar HaSulam. אמר רבי יוסי, we learn from here, מכאן נשמע, שכל אלו בעלי המחלוקת אין להם קיום. Those people who are busy being always in conflict and fight, they will never exist. They will never survive. That has to fall apart. שהרי כל זמן שבני העולם הם אלו עם אלו ברצון אחד ולב אחד. And that's a big secret. As long as the people of the world are united in one heart, in one desire, although they rebel against God, if they are united, lo shalat b'hem din ha'elyon, the upper judgment cannot rule their lives. כמו שאירע בדור הפלגה, כיוון שנחלקו, since they were separated by the loss of their language, now they fell apart. Nothing happened. They didn't die. There was no plague, earthquake, flood, something like this. So we learn from there that the highest level of the covenant is love others as you love yourself. The moment people accept that idea, then they are protected. When we try to love others, when we try to love others unconditionally, of course, you cannot love murderers and killers or whatever and terrorists. No, you can't do that. But people like you, and you try to love them, your family, your neighbors, and love them just the way God loves them. You try to create unity as much as you can. You do it for your own because that connects you to God and to protection. And when humanity creates unity and accepting the idea of loving others as you love yourself, then even if you don't really follow God, you do follow God because God is love and love is God. And then you're protected. So, and that is where Abraham took it from there because his message to the world was unconditional love, respect, chesed, giving grace to others, spreading that idea that yes, it looks like if I'm going to be vicious and I'm going to rob whoever is weaker than I am, I'm going to make so much gains. And Abraham showed no, it's the opposite. Love makes more gains. Love gives you protection. It's against what the eyes see, what the ears hear, what the logic understands, but for the long run, it works because this is accepting the covenant. When you are accepting the covenant, you are part of the ark of the covenant. Thank you. Good luck to all of us.